Hi guys, this is Courtney from Ruby Red Farm. I wanted to go through how I plan my garden, including how I plan my plant dates. So when it comes to planning my garden, there are a couple of important pieces of information that I really need to find out. One is my hardiness zone, and the other is my last frost date. So let me show you a really quick, easy way to do that online. Indiana had some big changes with the brand new map that they just put out. But if you go to the USDA's website and a quick search will find this for you. Once you're here, though, you're going to be looking in your area. Now, we're located near Richmond, which, again, I already know it's in 6A, but if it's a kind of borderline area, what you can do is simply put in your zip code, and you can look through and find where you're at. So it tells me I'm hardiness zone 6A. One of the things you need to figure out, though, is what is your last frost date? So we're going to go to a different calculator for that. So there are a lot of different places that you can get this information. However, as much as people tease the Farmer's Almanac, it is pretty darn accurate. And so I'm going to, again, put in my zip code, go through and see what my last frost date is. The reason the last frost date is so important is because a lot of those seedlings are simply too vulnerable to plant after it's going to be frosting. And so you would just end up losing your whole crop and having to start back over. I'm going to tell you what this says, and then I'll tell you what we actually do. So on here, it says that April 30th is the last spring frost. Now, keep in mind, this is 30% probability, right? Now, if you are anywhere near Indiana, or at least my area, everyone here says Mother's Day, and that is an old wives' tale around here. However, I will say 2 years in a row, we have had very late freezes that have really damaged the apple trees and done some hard damage to people's gardens. Both of those came within a week, give or take, of Mother's Day. One of them was actually on Mother's Day, was the really, really hard freeze. I think it was about May 8th when that happened. April 30th, again, while this is a great guideline, you want to know your area, and if you're not from the area you're growing in, it might be a good idea to start asking some locals because they probably know a little better than even the almanac does. So once I have all of that information, now the real fun begins. So we have just a very small store-bought indoor greenhouse. It's got some grow lights set up, and we do start most of our plants indoors. Now with plants like tomatoes, for example, you want to be starting those, it's 2 to 8 weeks before you put them outside. I have found that I want mine to actually be relatively large before I put them outside. Our property has a lot of wind. We don't have a lot of good natural wind breaks on our property. And so if I put a tomato plant that's only 4 or 5 inches tall, they actually tend to just get blown over. So we let ours get pretty big. We do end up having to harden them off pretty thoroughly by putting them on the porch for about a week off and on. We also will use a fan at times to kind of harden those stalks. And that's true with my pepper plants as well. So there's a lot of planning that goes into your garden. And so even though it's only January, this is actually when I do most of my garden planning. I end up starting the majority of my seeds in March. I start a few of the things that take a little longer, like the cabbage seeds, usually in late February. Now this year I'm going to be trying to use our greenhouse a little bit, so I'm starting a few of those cooler weather crops even earlier. One resource I wanted to pass along to you guys that has been an absolute lifesaver for me is this book by Melissa K. Norris. I am a huge fan of this book. The great part about all of this planning is you don't have to have it memorized. You do not have to be an expert. You do not have to know it all. There are resources out there that make your life a whole lot easier. I started these cabbage seeds 5 days ago, and we have life. Ta-da! So things to keep in mind when it comes to picking out your plants. I encourage you greatly to pick out plants and foods that you actually enjoy. No one wants to have 20 zucchinis if they don't even like zucchini, for example. So make sure you're picking out things that you like. In our case, we're growing it for a market garden, and so we plant a little bit of everything, but we do still tend to grow things that we enjoy. That way, if we have extras, we enjoy those ourselves. In most cases, we end up keeping the first cut of produce for ourselves anyway, because in my mind, that was the whole point of why we started a garden in the first place. So now that you know how to figure out your hardiness zone and your last frost date, let me show you how we have our garden plan laid out. So here in Excel, I typically go through, our garden is roughly 90 by 40, and these are where we typically end up putting our pathways. So I kind of have a nice idea of that from years past, which really does come in handy. You do want to know your garden space pretty well. In our garden, we are limited on a couple different things. One is the fact that we have a tree. This tree provides a lot of shade, which ends up being a good thing, and I'll explain why in a minute. Over here, this grayed out area is just a really rocky hill that we don't typically plant. We also have our manure pile that's located in that area because it's super convenient for us. Our orchard is off to the south, and then north is here at the top. We have to rotate based a little bit on what we had last year. So for example, I had corn in this area last year and I'll be having pole beans this year. So there are a lot of those aspects to keep in mind. That's why it's really nice to do this in Excel, because I can record this and I end up looking back at last year's and I can know where I planted everything. A couple things to point out. On our garden, I really like to plan pathways, one for the hose to be able to get through, but also just for us and for the kids to be able to get through. The reason I end up really liking our tree is because it provides a bit of a microclimate. So microclimate is an area that acts just a little bit more unique than what you would expect in your zone. But our zone here in Richmond, Indiana just recently changed to 6A. I still kind of plan though based on 5B to be on the safe side. Now with this tree providing shade, you'll notice this would be off to the east of this tree, meaning that it gets afternoon shade. So this afternoon shade is going to be hitting my cooler weather crops. So carrots, lettuce, broccoli, and cabbage. Those cool weather crops really struggle with the hot afternoon heat. And so while that tree may be looked at as a negative for a lot of people, I end up using it as an advantage. In our garden, I also prefer to keep our hot peppers in a totally separate spot. So here off further to the east, now it's a lot further than this shows, but off further to the east, we have a little hot pepper patch. It's probably 10 by 20. We were able to plant about 15 to 20 pepper plants out there this year. You really do want to keep your hot peppers separate from your sweet peppers or they will cross-pollinate. Further to the south, we actually added a new stretch of garden last year. So this is really pretty fresh soil that's only been used for one season. Last year we had pumpkins further to the west, so I'll be flip-flopping and putting pumpkins on the other side this year. It's really nice to have those in their own separate area because as you probably know, they get pretty wild. And then I just have kind of extra carryover space for some of our better sellers at the market. Bush beans thankfully have a very short growing season. So that's the rough layout of how my garden will go. I'll make adjustments as it gets closer to the season, but this helps me know how many seeds to order and know how many trellises and different cages I'm going to need to purchase, but also how many of those I'm going to end up needing to have my poor husband install for me. So once you have those hardiness zones, also keep in mind then that your seed packet is going to be a great resource. Your seed packet's going to give you all the guidance that you need on when to plant your seeds. It typically does give advice as well on when to start seeds. Our pepper seeds, for example, say to start those 6 to 8 weeks before moving them outside. That moving them outside then is the date that you'll match up with your last frost date. Again, I always add about a week to a week and a half to what the almanac says, and then you can go from there. And that's it, guys. I cannot wait till warmer weather. I know I'm not alone in that. Thank you so much for watching. I want to thank all of our new followers. We have gotten over 600 new subscribers in just a month's time, and we only had 70 a month ago. So we are so very grateful for you all. We are, again, learning as we go. I hope I've not come across as any type of an expert. I am a rookie in all of this, but I just want to show you what life is like on our little farm. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do for us. We appreciate your time and hope you all have a great day.